When you're speeding down the road of life and you come to an intersection, which way do you go? Welcome to Plot Twist Media's Crossroad.
Which way do you go? Do you take the easy road or do you take the road less traveled? Like today's guest who is making a difference in the lives of many. That kid, by the way, is a killer voice.
Unbelievable.
Killer little voice.
He's
going to make money.
If he isn't already.
Yeah.
He was so good.
Well, yeah, we paid him $50.
I know. So do that times 10.
Exactly.
And then times 1,000.
Exactly. Welcome to
Go
Plot
above
Twist
that
Media.
and I can't get what it is.
I don't know the math. Welcome to Plot Twist Media's Crossroad, the weekly homecast where we interview individuals who are making a difference in the world. I'm Phillip Deems.
And I'm Kevin O'Neill. Today's guest is the lovely Krissy Goss. Welcome, Krissy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. It's really exciting to have you.
So happy you're here.
You know, before we get started...
Why are you laughing? It's not funny.
I'm laughing at the lovely
That's
Krissy
serious.
Goss.
Isn't that wonderful?
You are lovely.
Yeah, that's nothing wrong with that. I love that.
And in the behind the scenes, they'll
did
see
you
how
hear how I
lovely you
said
are.
it too? I said the lovely Krissy Goss. It was very nice,
I know.
actually.
You had
Actually,
a
I think we should play that
voice.
back.
Soothing voice.
Before we get started, one of the things we like to do here at Crossroad, other than just go on about nothing, is the Ask Alexa segment.
Love this
So
segment.
you probably don't know this, but when Mark McEwen was here, we had a Ask Alexa a question.
Easy for you
That's
to say.
hard to say.
Yeah, it is when you put it back to back
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
and back to gack.
Yep.
Anyway, we're going to keep drinking as we talk. So anyway, we're going to have you do that a little bit later. Think
Yeah.
about the question. Don't worry about it right now. Don't let it get in your head.
Yep.
Okay.
It's okay. All right?
It's intense, but it's good.
Absolutely. I'd like to start with my first question, Krissy, and that is, can you tell us basically, how did hope start for you?
Well, back in, really it started back in my childhood, I think. Our mom always had a heart for people that were in crisis, and she brought runaways home. She brought a homeless lady that lived with us for about a year. And always taught us that we should just reach out to others and serve other people. So I kind of always kept that in the back of my mind, I think. And I jokingly used to say that our mother passed away in 2005, and then 2006 I started Hope. So it was like she was inside of me somewhere talking to me. But back in 2006, what really happened was I was just at a soccer game with my son, who was playing, and he was a teenager, and I was in downtown Orlando near the...
Old arena, wasn't it? The old Tangerine Bowl?
Yeah,
Tangerine
that's what I
Bowl?
was trying to remember the name of it. Yeah, so not a really great part of town.
Right.
And this couple approached me and said, could we just get some water? And I started feeling compelled to do more, and I started talking to them and got them in my car. I did get another parent to go with me because people are always like, well, you got in a car by yourself or whatever, crazy. So I got them in my car, and I said, well, tell me about what's going on. And it was a married couple with a baby on the way, and they were homeless. And I knew that there, was something more there. So I went and got him some food, and we sat and we talked. And I heard their story, and he had been in the building industry. And the crisis of the building industry crashed at that time, and then she was a CNA, a nursing assistant, and was struggling with her pregnancy with gestational diabetes, and had been sick so much that she was laid off from her job because she missed so much work. They ended up losing their place they were living, their home. They were living in their car, and then the car was repossessed, and everything they had in their car was thrown away. And I verified that. I the next day, after I got them situated in a very cheap hotel, not a nice place, but it was just the best I could do around the area. And when I called the guy that had repossessed their car, he said, oh, they were just bums. I threw away everything. And this was...
Oh, my God.
And this is their marriage certificate, her college transcripts.
Oh, my God.
Everything they had was in their car, and now it was gone. So that was just shocking.
You called them
to me.
bums, and she's pregnant.
Right.
That's, yeah.
Well, and when I talked to them, what really shocked me was the no room at the inn kind of thing. They could not get into a shelter because of the fact that they were married and pregnant. And I was like, what? I've lived around here for a long time, 30 years in Oviedo, and I was like, and they were from Seminole County, by the way.
Right.
They were in Orange County because they couldn't find anything in Seminole County, because there is only one shelter in Seminole County to this day. And so there was very limited places to go at that point in 2006. So they had gone down to downtown area to try to find services, but nobody would take them in. So I naively at that time, I was like, I have to do something. I'll put you in a hotel tonight, and then I promise you I'm going to make some phone calls and I will get you into a shelter, and we'll get you guys taken care of. Well, I had a cell phone, a house phone at that time, computer, and I couldn't find any place that would take them. Everywhere I called, everywhere I spoke to, everywhere I went online, which you couldn't find anything online, by the way. I was like, why can't you just go on like a hotel and find a shelter? I thought it would be that easy.
Actually, it should be.
Yeah, I really thought it would be that easy. I was like, this is ridiculous. So I made a bunch of phone calls to people that I knew. I knew a guy that was a commissioner, and I knew some people. Nope. Nobody in the shelters I talked to.
As well connected as you are, you would think you would be able to find one person that could help.
Yeah, I kind of thought I would be able to. And no, because of the fact that they were married and a baby on the way, that no shelter said, no, oh, baby on the way,
That makes no sense to me.
Right.
Is it because they're afraid she may go into labor? I mean, what was that makes no sense to me.
I think so. I think the liability, and there was no family shelters at that time. Right. None.
I see.
This was a phenomenon that families were on the street, homeless. There really wasn't before that. It was the single guy. It was the drug issue. It was a single woman, but not a couple with babies and children. And then, and that time, what was going on was Katrina had hit, so we had a lot of families that had to evacuate from New Orleans, and they came to Florida trying to find a new place to live.
So timing, it was just a bad time.
It was timing, and so we ended up, the statistics were horrendous. When I started doing more research, I found out that 50% of the homeless population in the country at that time were families with children.
That's unbelievable.
So I couldn't believe it. I was like, I can't believe this. So I just felt like I needed to do something for them. And so I just had not ever really worked in social services. I was pretty naive about it, but I was a businesswoman. So I thought, well, I'm just going to start educating myself and become knowledgeable about it. Started reading about it. I went to conferences for the homeless. I went to Washington, and I met Jay Hine at the time, with the head of HUD. And he said to me, this is great that you're a businesswoman, because we need people that are business people. We don't need people that are just social workers. Right. Not that social workers aren't needed, but we need people running these things, because it's difficult. So I was like, all right, well, that kind of gave me a little bit of impetus to move forward, because I was kind of doubting myself completely, actually. So I went back to Florida and from Washington, and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do something. I didn't know exactly what. And
how did the idea of the thrift store, how did that come in?
That was a God thing. I went to my pastor of my church, and I said, I'm feeling like I should do something to start serving people. By the way, I was still serving this couple, Chris and Melody. We were still helping them. It took us like 6 months to get them back on their feet, get their records back, get everything back, because
That's fantastic, though.
Once you lose your license and your ID, you can't go into a facility without an ID.
Right.
You can't get an ID without an ID. It was like...
And all of that was in the car.
Catch-22. Yeah, all in the car, gone. So you don't think about that when people that are homeless face that. If they have their backpack stolen, which happens all the time for the homeless, they can't go into the shelter the next night because you don't have an ID. You don't have anything to show. Mm-hmm. So we were helping Chris and Melody, and we were trying to get them back on their feet and get their records and get them situated and get them into an apartment eventually, which we did, and get them jobs. Sorry, I banged that.
You're good.
But in that meantime, I was feeling compelled to do more, and I thought, and here's the sad part: she lost the baby, and that when she lost the baby, I was like, man, if she could have not been on the street crawling into they were crawling into cars that were just happened to be open, and they would crawl in and sleep. She wasn't getting prenatal care because she couldn't get in to get prenatal care. She didn't have an ID. It just was compounded to the point where if she could have been kept in her home and not ended up on the street, then maybe she wouldn't have lost the baby. Maybe things wouldn't have fallen apart like it did.
Yeah.
But when I talk to people, they would say, oh no, there's no prevention services. That's just not possible. The federal government does not fund prevention. And this is in 2006. Now there is prevention, but that was back then. But was
that's
not.
Still not that far.
No, not that long ago.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago.
No.
No,
That's
12
why it
years
was
later.
crazy that
Right.
we had in our logo was to prevent homelessness. They're
Right.
like, you're crazy. I mean, I was told that, and I was involved. But what happened was lots of amazing things happened. I met with my pastor, and I said, I feel like I should do something. I feel like I should start a nonprofit, but I have no idea why I'm even feeling this way, and I don't know where I'm supposed to do it. Do we have a need in our area of Oviedo where I lived? Unbelievably, I was that naive that I didn't know we had a need.
Sure.
But he goes, well, this is what you should do. You should start a thrift store. And I was like, I do not. As Kevin knows, I'm a clean freak. And the thought of opening a thrift store was the last thing I wanted to do. So I left the meeting. We prayed, and I was like thankful for that, and that he was going to, just think about what I could do. I went home and I was like, but that's not what I wanted to do. But I'm sitting there at my desk, and I remember the moment that I just was knowing that I was being called to do something. And I didn't know what the next step was. So I literally said, God, if you want me to do this, you have to tell me. You have to show me the way. And my phone rang right then. And it was my pastor. And he goes, hey, there's a woman in our church, and she just called me. She has a thrift store, but she's ill and can't run it anymore. But she wants it to go to somebody that's doing a mission of some kind of ministry. And I was like, okay. Really, I was like,
Now I'm
that's
gonna
wonderful.
do it.
There's your answer.
But there was my answer.
Yeah.
Met with her 2 days later, took over the thrift store in 2 weeks. And that's how the thrift store started. But what I discovered was the thrift store was absolutely the perfect solution for how I would run Hope, because I needed a facility, had no idea what I was going to do, but the thrift store enabled us to start, and it was in a great part of town where there was heavy need. Within about a month, I was approached by a pastor in a local church, and they said, hey, the local food pantry just closed down. Would you start a food pantry? And I'm like, well, I have no idea how to do that either, but apparently that's what I'm supposed to do. So, okay. So we met with the people that ran the pantry, and we carved out a section in basically a shed of the back of the building,
Right.
which was about 900, maybe not even 900 square feet.
Right.
I don't know if you remember. It was pretty small.
It was small.
Maybe 500 square feet, full of junk to the ceiling. Cleaned it out, and that was how we started rolling with Hope. But it was that moment, I think, when my pastor Joe called me and said, or God answered it, in my question of, hey, I need you to do something. And he said, well, here you go.
Yeah.
So that was really the beginning.
It's funny because a lot of the people that you talk to, or we've talked to, or I've met over the years, that's exactly what they say. Every one of them that has made major changes.
Like everybody.
There is a moment. There's one moment that all of them remember.
A defining moment.
It's a defining moment, and that is right in line with everybody.
Because I often wonder, like when you were talking to this woman that night, I wonder if it ever crossed your mind, what if that night I'd have stayed home? What if that night I'd have gone a different route instead of there? What if I'd have talked to a friend for 20 minutes and not been there, and she'd have got back in the car and I never saw her? Does it ever go through your mind?
Oh,
and what would have happened?
I thought about so many things of why did this people... There was a ton of parents along the sideline. They came up to me. And maybe I just look like a sucker. I don't know.
No.
You look like you had water.
No.
Yeah. And
that's telling that that's what they asked for.
Right. They didn't ask for money. They asked for water.
Right.
And they were visibly hot. It was hot.
Sure, yeah.
And they had been on the road just walking for a month or something by then. They had been on the street. So they didn't look like you would expect a homeless person to look like, as far as, you see the ratty. They didn't look that bad.
Sure.
I didn't know they were homeless at first.
Right. Right.
And the fascinating thing that you said is that actually they're from Seminole County, which is where you're from.
Right.
They just happen to be in Orange County because they
Right.
couldn't get into Seminole, and now here you are running across them.
Right.
So you're thinking, well, I'm from Seminole, I can fix this, and
Right.
and it was difficult because
Right.
to me that's the plight of what people deal with. You just mentioned you have a license, you lose that license, you lose your backpack. Now you can't get another one, and you can't get into a shelter. You got this crazy loop
Catch
that you get
22.
caught up.
It's a vicious cycle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It amazed me because being in the business world, you just like I was saying, you can go online and get a hotel. We can just do anything we want on a computer, but what was going on back then was it was very difficult to get services. They've changed a lot since then. But for instance, how often do you see a public telephone anymore? You don't. Right?
You don't. Yeah.
Well, how were they supposed to call for services? So how were they supposed to find out if there was a shelter or a room in a place? There wasn't any way. So they would walk. Someone would say, oh, you need to go over here. So they would walk all day, get there, and then there was no openings. Right. They'd say, oh, no, we don't take married couples with a baby. Now, they would separate them and put him in the men's shelter and her in the women's, but they wanted to stay together.
It's a family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is understandable.
Right.
But the other thing that people don't know is, do you remember the movie The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
Which I got to meet the guy that movie was about, by the way.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So when he was running from work and he got delayed by his boss and he had to pick up his son from the childcare, and then he got in line at the shelter and he didn't get in, that's because most shelters have a time slot. If you don't line up by 4:30, you don't get in that night. And now let's just say you're
Wow, talk
working
about
all
making it
day
difficult. Yeah.
and you don't have a car, so you're taking the bus system, which takes like 2 hours to get across town. How are you going to get to that shelter that night so that you can get a meal, a shower, and then get up for work the next day? So there's the issue that these homeless families and people face is if they don't get lined up by time. So they're working in those places that pick them up on the street corner to work all day.
Right.
They don't get you back by 4:30.
No.
It might be 7:30 at night.
You won't get a job again if you do that.
Right.
You know?
So then they don't get a good night's sleep. They sleep on the street. They don't get a shower. They don't get a meal, and then they go to work the next day. It's just
It's a vicious cycle.
And
the things
so-
they dealt with was unbelievable to me.
And so the whole idea of when you started this foundation was to help people. I remember originally the idea was to just give, hey, you said all the stuff that comes in here is free, I'll just give it away.
Right.
Which was one idea and one aspect. But then you progress to the next level, which is why don't I teach them and get them back into the workforce,
Right.
which I thought was the next phase, which was fascinating. And
Well,
when did that actually come into play?
You're right. When I got the thrift store, of course, we did sell product to keep the place open because I had to pay rent.
Sure.
We had to pay, the electric and all the things you have to run a business with. But also, the thrift store did allow me to start giving product to those in need. So we had people that lost their home to a fire, and we could give them everything they needed because usually with a crisis like that, it might take a month before the insurance even helps them out. So they might have lost all their clothing, their backpacks, their everything. So we would give them everything they need. Or if they were homeless and getting into a place, we could give them everything they need.
Right.
So there was that aspect of it, and that was, you're right, in the beginning of that plan. But then when we started having the families come to the food pantry, and then we started meeting with them, I wasn't a case manager, but I would just meet with them. I would find out it wasn't just food. It was they lost their job, because of health issues and and they couldn't find a new job, and they had gotten into this cycle of everything falling apart. So I started thinking, we've got to go back. We got to figure out, how do we help them long term? How do we get them through this crisis, but then sustainable? So there was a big mindset change for me, and that was probably, we took over the thrift store in April of 2007. June we started the food pantry, and in October we started kind of our official case management, which was just me in a kitchen at the thrift store behind a curtain.
Oh, wow.
Meeting with families. I mean, that was what it was, our case management.
Well, it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, it was rudimentary in the beginning, but really what happened was I started reaching out to tons of people who had actually the skills.
Right.
and they would come in and volunteer and
Right.
offer case management and stuff like that. So that's how it
Fantastic.
started in the beginning. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
We have a segment that we call In the News, and it's sponsored by Orlando Sentinel. And I read something just today that there's a thing called Good Source Staffing. And it is basically, there was a guy named Melvin Brainan. He was sleeping under a bridge. He's 40 years old, and they put him in a maintenance crew in Orlando. And ever since then, his boss says he's a model employee. He's a great employee. Yeah. And, you know, it's something like this that I think other people that are trying to do the same thing, it's because that's why I asked that question earlier. You know, how do we get them to the next level? It's one thing to help them, and people need help,
right?
But they don't want to continue receiving help. They want to get back where they were. This is a good example, I would think, of you know, Orlando making the attempt and putting people out there that really do want to work. There are people that want to work, and there are people that want to take advantage of the system. But.
Yeah.
And there's actually a misnomer too, because majority of the homeless population, they have jobs.
Right.
But maybe because of crisis, they have lost their home, but they're still working.
Right.
Or they've lost their job because of a healthcare issue. I had a woman that was a nurse, and she had cancer, lost her job, lost her insurance, and just trickled down to what happened.
Sure.
So, but back to what you were saying about the people, you know, that they can be great, you know, employees, because they're just, most do want to work. Most want to be okay. But what is the problem is in our system back then, and it's changed a lot, is that they wanted people to, most people are like, well, I just want them to go get a job and then get themselves together and get back on their feet. Why can't they just do that? But when you find out how difficult it is, we need to help them by getting them into some kind of housing so that they can go to sleep at night, get a shower, wake up in the morning refreshed, and go to work.
Exactly.
But we didn't do that. We were like, nope, they have to pass this criteria first. But now there are things. There's Housing First, which is a program that puts them into housing and then lets them get back on their feet, get them the counseling they need, get them financial literacy. That's what we do at Hope, is there's financial literacy program. We help them with counseling, legal services, whatever might help the family get back on their feet.
Right.
Maybe they just need help with citizenship, or lots of things like that are going on that are very costly. People think, well, just become a citizen and then you don't have to be. Well, it's not that easy.
Right.
It takes years and money to become a citizen of the United States.
How much do you think the business mindset actually helps these types of situations? So, for example, a lot of the people that are out there doing great things, they're very philanthropic. They get out there, they immediately start putting forth the effort to help, but they either fall short because of funding, or they fall short because they don't get the support. How much do you think your business mindset helped?
Well, I don't think that it's because I was such a great businesswoman. I think it was more the passion that I had for it, because I wasn't going to accept no. So I think that's a lot of it.
Good for you.
People would say, you're not going to, I was told I would not succeed.
Right.
I ended up on the...
By the way, to me, that's when you know you're heading in the right direction.
Right.
I mean, seriously.
Really.
Tell me I'm crazy and see what happens.
And I'm very stubborn,
Sure.
and I'm very opinionated.
Sure.
So I was like, you're not going to tell me I can't do this.
I'm doing this, yeah.
I'm going to do it. I also feel like there was a path that was, I got put on.
Sure.
Like I said, when that pinnacle moment happened, then my pastor has a lady that happens to have a thrift store. Then this other thing happened, and then I got a call, and I was asked to serve on the Central Florida Regional Commission on Homelessness. And that was a new commission that was being formed to address the homeless issue back in 2007.
Perfect.
How I got appointed to that commission when I knew nothing about the situation. I knew nothing. I was so not educated. There was so many more people that should have been on there. But it opened the door for me to meet with people that did know.
Right.
And I would make a phone call and go, oh, and I was chair of housing, by the way. I got appointed to chair of housing of the regional commission. Like, that made sense at all. So that was God to me, giving me opportunities to learn, get opportunities to meet people that were influential in that area, and become much more educated, and then also be able to make a difference with the work I was doing with Hope. because I knew what I was doing by then.
Right.
I was like, wait a minute. And then the other thing was, because people that are middle class America, we do not accept being put down or downtrodden. This young couple, when I took them to, and I won't say the name of the nonprofit because it's a very large one, I was just getting them back on their feet. I got them into an apartment, and I wanted to find a local food pantry near them so that they could get food till they could get back on their feet and get a job and get some money saved, because they needed to pay rent at the apartment, but they were my friend gave us a good deal, a real good deal. Real good. So I called the local food pantries, and they're like, oh, well, where do they live? And they hadn't been in the apartment yet. And I go, well, they were from Seminole, but they're now living in they're going to be living in Orange County. That's why I called you. Oh, but they're Seminole County residents. They can't come here to this one. And then I'm like, well, they're going to be living there, so they will be. Well, until they live there, we can't get them in.
If you had to do it all over, you'd go, oh, they're from here.
Yeah, I was just
because
like,
that's like the answer.
So I got them into the apartment, called them, said I'm bringing them over, drove them over, and I waited in the car, and they walked up, and they came back, and their heads were down. And I'm like, what's wrong? And they're like, it's okay. And they just get in the car, and they're just been so pushed beaten down that they were just accepting it. And I went, what's wrong? They go, well, apparently we came too late. And I go, what? And I go, I'm walking up to the door. I'm banging on the door. I see all this food in bags. And the woman opens the door. She goes, excuse me? I go, hi, I'm the one that called. I have the family that they need food. She goes, oh, we didn't know they were with you.
Oh, nice.
That shouldn't have mattered.
Pull up in a Mercedes and then you can get the food. How's that?
So they let them in. How gracious of them. Sorry. And got food. But
don't be sorry, because it's
but I was so appalled by that. And then also I was appalled by the fact that it was only open for like 2 hours. I mean, it wasn't open at night. It wasn't open on the weekends. So what about people that are in need that couldn't get access to food because they were working?
Right.
So I always said to myself, before I even started the food pantry, I was like, if I ever start a food pantry, it's going to be open on the weekends. It's going to be open, available for them so they can get to it. And if anybody walks in anytime, they're going to get food. And that's how Hope is. It have specific hours, but you don't. If you walk in and you go, I really need food, we have emergency food. And then you come back and you get your food.
That's great.
Right.
And then a lot of the things that Hope does are things because of the things we saw out there in other service agencies that we didn't think were working.
Right.
When I called to get the gentleman in this couple work boots, because he was going to do that day labor stuff to get a job, and they needed the work boots, but he didn't have the money. Those are really expensive.
They are expensive. Yeah.
So I called around to nonprofits that might have a thrift store, might have these kind of boots or something. Oh yes, you can come over on Tuesday between 8 and 9.
He needs them now.
And not only that, how is he going to get over there on Tuesday? It was just this was Wednesday of the week before, so he'd have to wait till Tuesday. I'm like, he can't come. I can't come over there now. And just no. And it just was a lot of things that I saw.
Red tape.
The red tape, the things I saw. For instance, I mean, we have a lot of moms at that time that couldn't get into shelters because they had their young boy with them, and they would have shelters at that time didn't have there was no family shelters.
Right.
They would put the mom in the women's shelter and the young boy under 12, even if he was 12 or older, in the men's shelter.
Wow.
So you can imagine.
Yeah,
that's awkward.
That's
not only awkward, unsafe because there are mentally ill people.
Sure.
So the moms, instead of going to a shelter because they were not going to put their young boy,
they didn't want them in. Yeah,
they would stay in their car, and they would stay and live in their cars instead. So we saw all kinds of things, that those barriers to getting the kind of assistance that just made us realize we needed to do something preventative.
Right.
And that was when I was on the regional commission that I was told I was crazy. When I did other things out there in the community with other coalitions, they would say there's no prevention. But I was like, well, why can't we, for instance, pay for somebody's car to get fixed so that they don't lose their job.
Right.
So that they don't lose their apartment and they don't end up on the street.
Right.
Oh, no. Government doesn't pay for, well, then we're not going to get government money.
Right.
We're going to do it with just private donations and grants and funding that way. And that's how Hope is still.
Fantastic.
You don't get federal funding.
And let's just kind of talk about that right now, because at one point it was you. And you were in a thrift store, and you were, I remember walking in one day and you were organizing the thrift clothes, which was hilarious to look at. But, then it became...
By color.
I love that.
And then it turned into this big organization. How many people, tell us, how many people now work for Hope, and how many extended volunteers?
Well, in 2011, I stepped down as CEO, and that was when Joan Faulkner took over as CEO. I've stayed involved as a volunteer. But at that point, we were still in this old dumpy building, the original, I say dumpy building, I shouldn't say that. Take that out of there. It was an old building, very, very falling apart though. And so it was hard to give, and it was very, we weren't able to give services properly. People in the food pantry had to wait outside. We had the resource center was literally still like little area with a curtain.
Right.
It just was no space to do anything proper. So we knew we needed to raise the money to do a capital campaign to get out of there. So we started really, at that point, we were working on it back then and realizing we had to grow. We had to be able to serve people. The food pantry was about, from the beginning we first served families, it was probably 75 people the first week we opened, and Hope now serves about 300 families per week in the food pantry.
Bravo.
So it's a huge endeavor, just the food pantry. Then you have the families getting case management. Now Hope has 4 case managers. Some are volunteers, some are staff. We have an amazing group of resource people there now that are doing all kinds of things for families. There are, I believe, 10 full-time staff and 10 part-time staff, so 20. And then I believe the number of volunteers is about 900 volunteers.
Fantastic.
But that is for the resource center, for outreach events, the Christmas in the city, Shamrock and Run is a fundraiser. There's the Kids of Hope program. There's the Hens home delivery program. All the things that Hope does now came from a need in the community. So it built over a period of about 5 years of building all the programs and getting it to be sustainable. And then, we could move forward on really raising money to buy a building, which Hope now has a building that the thrift store exists in that's beautiful. It's beautiful. And then behind it on a back road, which is nice because it's kind of hidden because people don't still like to see poverty.
We understand.
We don't want to have that around. So
please don't, right?
Yeah. So the resource center though is beautiful, and it's a building behind the thrift store that is where the case management is, the resource services. There's a waiting room. It's just
very cool.
So
it's
beautiful.
Called Hope Chest now, isn't it?
The thrift store is Hope Chest, and then Hope Resource Center. Hope Helps.
Fantastic.
So there was something I read that the Coalition for the Homeless said, and this is so powerful when I read it because it goes in line with some of the things you said tonight. They said that by stabilizing people through the shelters, moving them into permanent housing, and implementing assistance programs to keep them in their housing, we can not only reduce but eliminate homelessness in New York City. That is such a big statement. And when you say reduce, that's a big deal. But eliminate is another thing. And I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
I absolutely believe that homelessness could be ended. And we're talking about people living on the street. I believe that there's ways that we can have we need affordable housing for one.
Right.
Sure.
There's really not enough affordable housing. And they're being, even here in Orlando, Pine Hills, they're developing it.
Yeah.
And the families that live there are going to be pushed out.
Sure.
Yep.
So then you're going to Eatonville has fought for that, to have affordable housing available. And nice affordable housing.
Right.
But earlier I was mentioning Housing First. That Housing First program is a federal funded program to put homeless people in, I hate to say that way.
We understand.
To put people experiencing homelessness into housing, and then provide them with the services to get them back where they're working and they're functioning. And some haven't been on the proper medication. Some need some, definitely do need counseling or something to help them. There's a huge population of veterans that are struggling with PTSD.
Most definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
And that is a huge proportion of our homeless population that people just don't like to know, but it's true.
It's the truth, yeah.
So they're self-medicating because they couldn't get the services they maybe need. Then they end up on the street because they just are irrational and not functioning. So yes, Kevin, back to the question. I believe if we could get people into housing, affordable housing, help them for the first few months, then taper it off when they get themselves situated and get working and get themselves back together again, accessing resources and counseling and life skills, budgeting, helping them get their life in order, because sometimes people just get way off track. And that's something that I think, I believe very much so, that we can
eliminate it.
And ultimately,
Yes.
that's what
Yes.
everybody wants anyway.
Yes.
Really. I mean, there's a thought, that a lot of people are like, well, they just, it's just the way they want to be, or that's what's happening. They don't really care about working, etc. Which just doesn't. It's not the case. So
there may be a 1%.
well, of course there is. Yeah,
portion of the population that there's something going on there.
Sure.
That I don't know what this situation.
Well, they have
may
mental
be.
issues, or they have drug issues, and that's a small portion that's going to be there even if we cure homelessness. They're going to be out there.
Yeah.
But there are places where they're building these communities where they're putting very small little places. They're sort of like, almost like a hotel room size, but they have their own little kitchen.
Oh, I love it.
And a bedroom.
Yeah.
And they all live in this community. They garden. They can work. They have to bring money in. And there's programs like that successfully running where they are not homeless anymore.
Right.
And they might have the mental issue, but they're being helped.
Right.
And they're all together a lot of times it's also, there's not that family structure.
Right.
So that's why people fall into homelessness, because if you have kids and they're struggling, you're going to help them.
Yeah. And I was thinking when you mentioned this earlier, it really is about housing.
Yeah,
if you think about it.
It is.
Because when you look at, even, when we're coming out of college, it's hard to find a place to live.
Very good point.
Even if you have a job that's paying you a decent wage. It's
Right.
hard to pay rent.
I was just listening to NPR on the way here, and it was saying that millennials are having the hardest time purchasing homes because the housing market is out of reach for them.
Well, and not only that, they have student loans. They have all these crazy,
debts
that they have
to deal with.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
So there was something else I read, that the highest rate of homelessness among states are in Hawaii, 465 per 100,000. In Mississippi, it's 81 per 100,000. So my question would be, what is Mississippi doing that Hawaii isn't? Why is that such a big gap?
Well, I'm not an expert on these things, but I do know just that Hawaii has had huge issues because of industry dying there. The pineapple industry went under, the sugar industry. They have their coffee industry, but it's not as thriving as it used to be. So there's a lack of jobs in Hawaii, which is why there's a huge homeless population.
That makes sense right there. That totally makes sense.
So that's a huge, and it's very expensive in Hawaii.
No, it is.
Definitely.
It's super expensive.
Yeah.
So just a young couple working 2 jobs, which we have family there, both the husband and wife both working, and it's difficult to afford a home there.
Yeah, I've heard that. So another question for you. It's 2018. You started in 2006. It's been 12 years. And I just was curious, do you have any kind of barometer that shows what you've done in your group? Is there any way to even know, like, this is what we've been able to accomplish since we started 12 years ago?
Oh, well, there is a lot of statistics and yeah, definitely information like that. Annual report and all kinds of information about how many families we've helped, how many it's hard to gauge prevention because people go, well, how do you prove prevention?
Sure.
But we can show that these families came to us in crisis and now they're not. Right. So that's what we can show. Perfect. And that is definite. There's definitely markers that we can show. And then also, I just think that, in our area where we're located, there's so many programs that we do that that enable families to maybe sustain things a little better. For instance, Kids of Hope program, it serves children meals, lunches when they're out of school. And these are families that while they're out of school, they may not be able to have enough meals at home for them. They might have 1 or 2 meals. So Kids of Hope came out of that need that we discovered, that someone told me. They were like, well, there's kids that go without meals when they're out of school. And I was like, again, another what?
How does that
my
happen,
kids
right?
had plenty, you know.
Sure.
So I just never even imagined kids were going without. So we started Kids of Hope really small, just summer, and now we serve all school breaks throughout the year, and it's probably 400 or 500 kids that are served from the Kids of Hope lunch program.
Wow.
That helps those families while the kids are out of school so that they can maybe pay the water bill or pay something else, buy them school clothing or whatever. But then we also realized that was a huge expense for parents. So now we have the Kids of Hope back to school program, and we provide them with not just backpacks and school supplies. They get eye exams. They get all kinds of services at the Kids of Hope Back to School Bash, where it enables them to walk into school looking and ready for school and prepared. So those kind of programs also offset the costs of the families that are in these situations, where we have situations where the dad might have been working and making a good paying job, but then he's laid off and now he can't find a job. He might have been, doing very, very well, but he may be 50 years old and nobody will hire him. We've had those kind of situations. So he ends up going and getting a job, let's just say at a Home Depot or Lowe's, or let's just say one of those, and they're making $25,000 a year.
Right.
The poverty guideline in America is a family of 4. If you are making above $24,900, you cannot access any services.
That's crazy.
24,900.
$24,900. So imagine trying to survive on $24,900 for a family of 4 when you were living in your house. So you have your house, you have all the things you were paying before, you lost that job that you were paying all this, and then you're now making above the poverty guideline, and you can't get any food stamps or any kind of any health insurance like Medicaid. You can't get any of those things. So people don't realize that if you make $1 above the poverty guideline, you cannot access any services.
The sad thing about that is we just had the Congress recently say if you make $450,000, you're middle class.
Right.
And
right.
Talk about out of touch, because you got people at 24,000. I don't even know how and you're talking about 4 people.
It's crazy.
And the family they got to take care of on that.
Right.
You can't even pay a mortgage.
No, you're so right. They're so out of touch with
that. And then by the way, you lose everything at that point too.
Well, right.
Even if you're making $25,000 a year, you start losing all these things that you once had, and then that's when that snowball effect happens.
Right, you are so right, because they maybe don't have health insurance anymore, so then you have the cost of health insurance, you have all these things. So it's just a multitude of things that we can help them with, because Hope is, again, not federally funded. They can come in and get the services every week, get the services, get the assistance, and that's why it's so critical. Is the beauty of the
story of what you did as the founder, because no more will there be someone walking down the street, can I have water, and not be able to have a resource. What you did is you closed that gap. That gap is gone, and people can do that now, and that's important. You know what I mean?
Wonderful.
It happened to you, and you stuck to it, and 12 years later, there are resources for people, and that's important that you were able to accomplish that.
I'd like to ask one question.
Well, it's not just me, though. I mean, I want to say, from the beginning, it was the volunteers, it was the people that came around me, because there was no way I could do it on my own. I was just, and I know really Joan, just had the idea. I know
Joan stepped in at a crucial time in your life, and it was a big, I mean, we could talk about that if you want, but it was a very difficult time that you went through, and she stepped in and she took the reins and she went with it, and thank God she did, because it was an important job at that point to just jump in and do that.
Yeah, because it was midstream, and I had taken it from the beginning, so I had time to acclimate to the craziness, and then she just had to jump in, so that was hard.
She jumped in feet first. Yep.
Yeah, and she's taken it, and now I'm very, very proud of what Hope does and how it serves people. I really am.
One question I would have, and a lot of people, obviously the story to this point is it's brilliant. one thing I would like to ask is, do you have one example of a family that you've taken really from concept to completion? You know, someone who was on the streets and, you know, has gone through every little aspect of it.
Yeah.
Do you have a story?
There's this one family that they just touched me really deeply. They were a married couple. They had 4 children. The father was brilliant man, had been in an accident and lost use of his arm, one of his arms. I'm trying to remember. This was a while ago. This was many years ago, but it just touched me so much because he was so diligent and trying to get their lives back together, but multitude of crises.
Sure.
By the time they came to Hope, they were homeless. I met them at an outreach event and invited them to come down to Hope. They worked so hard with everything we told them they needed to do.
Right.
They did it.
Right.
They worked so hard, the 2 of them. I was never more happy the moment we moved them into their apartment.
Love it.
And then they eventually got into their own house.
Love it.
And they soared because they just got the help they needed.
And what is their story now? How long ago was that first?
Oh my gosh, that has been some time. And there's hundreds of families like that since.
Sure.
But the reason they just touched me is because they had so many things besides the physical thing of his arm.
4 kids.
And 4 kids.
Yeah.
And just the most wonderful people that never were negative. Never. I mean, they were going through a tough time, so it was hard. And I'm not saying they weren't have hard times. But boy, they were just like, we're just going to keep going. We're just going to keep doing it. So they just impressed me because we were just there helping them with whatever we could do. But the families that come, they have to take those steps.
Right.
They have to do the things that we tell them, hey, you've got to do this. You've got to do this to help yourself. We can't do it for them.
Right.
So they were probably that first time I saw somebody just jump in and go, okay, what else do we have to do? How do we get through this? What do we need to do? Because they wanted to get off the street.
I love it.
So yeah, they were special.
Well, you know, Crossroad is about people that meet that road at some point and they decide to make a turn in that direction, and they're motivated, but they don't really know why. I think some people just don't know why.
That's
and
true.
I think everybody's had that. And that's a great story. I mean, I think you can sit back now and look at where hope is. I mean, I know I go to the Christmases in the city, and I've watched in 10 years, every single year, more and more and more, and tractor trailers are showing. And I look at that and think, this all started from a little thrift store. And, you know, that's got to be a big thing for you. I mean, even when we look at, you know, anyway, it doesn't really matter. But the point is that to look back at that, I mean, to drive by, I don't even know if I don't even know if that thrift store is even on that road. They've changed that area in
the
Oviedo
building
so much.
is still there. The
Is it
building is
really?
still there. So
Wow.
Yeah, but you know, for me, it is the same way. I go to Christmas in the City is a special outreach event. I mean, you serve. A lot of people don't want to come for services because they're embarrassed.
Sure.
And they think, well, somebody else needs this more than me.
Right.
A lot of people say that, and you're like, no, you're the kind of family we're trying to help. It's okay.
Exactly right. Yeah.
But Christmas in the City draws them in because they can get much needed toys for their kids and other services at that event that they know they can't afford. Because you can imagine if you're in crisis and you're already struggling, how are you going to afford anything for Christmas?
Right.
So that's a huge time of the year where people are down. So we started Christmas in the City not just to give them toys, but to give them hope and give them some love that day. And so it became this bigger than life event where there is so many things that the families get, but they also are just loved on the whole way around. A shepherd walks them through, and then they come outside and they're given a meal. They get food to take home for their Christmas meal to cook at home because it's about a week before Christmas. They get Christmas trees to decorate at home. They get the toys, and we have volunteers wrapping them that day, so they go home with wrapped gifts. The kids are in childcare, so they don't see the gifts until Christmas morning, so it's from the mom and dad. It's not from Hope, it's from them.
Right.
So they leave there, I mean, with the biggest smiles. I mean, you know, because you've been there. We have a stage outside and worship teams and bands playing all day, and Kevin's our MC, and
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin
Yeah, that was a mix. They gave me a mic one day and they never got it back.
I was
actually
about to
take
say,
the mic
you ran
home
with that,
me.
didn't you?
Yeah, actually, this is the mic I'm talking
we've tried.
Same mic.
Yeah, it's the same
We've
one.
tried to take it away from
No,
him.
I tackle people if
Get
they
away.
try to get it. Yeah.
Get away.
No, Joan made Kevin, his name tag says Director of Fun.
Yes.
Because he comes
From the
in.
day I
can see that.
You should come. It's
I'll be there.
it's wonderful.
Yeah. It
I
really
love
is.
that event
I love
because
it,
it really epitomizes what Hope's about, of giving people hope.
Love it. Yeah.
So it really just touches me so
Can
much.
you just take us back to the very first Christmas in the city and talk about what it was and what it is now? Because I think it's really grown into
Oh my
this.
gosh! Well,
And while you're at it, this is why I asked this, because there are semi trucks that pull up, and I know that it wasn't
Love
you.
hearing that.
What I think happens is that somebody goes, "Really? Oh, I'd love to be a part of that," and then it just builds, it snowballs. And I guess where I'm going with this is, if this takes on, grassroots, and people start seeing this across the country,
yeah.
what could happen? You know what
I
mean?
would love that.
Yeah.
I would love there to be. I personally feel that the federal government should probably stay out of social services.
Yeah.
I don't think they do too good at it, to be honest. So I think that it should be grassroots organizations, churches. By the way, I didn't even mention this, my gosh, is that Christmas in the City and Hope is possible by multitude of churches.
Sure.
There's like 15 churches that help Hope, support us,
Love it.
are involved with putting
Bring
Christmas
all the
in the
pastors
city.
in and talk and everything. Yeah.
They collect all the toys, all the food, everything to go to Christmas in the City. So it wouldn't be possible without
course.
all of those people and the churches. But that's where I think it should go, because what happened was, Christmas in the City came about, and the reason the churches got involved was where do you go when you need help? You don't even know where to go. So a lot of times people walk into a church. But the churches they'll help them financially, but they don't really have the capacity to give them case management and help them and figure out and track it. And
To get them back on the right path.
right.
Yeah.
So at my church, we started talking to them and we were like, hey, why don't we work together in partnership? And that was how that all started. And then we formed a church coalition. This is in 2008.
That's very smart, by the way.
So the church coalition really did
Smart.
help us a lot, because they came together and go, we can't do this, we'll support Hope so that they can serve those people.
Right. That's
So
fantastic.
that's probably another important part of it.
It is. It's
Yeah.
a big part of it. And I think it's an amazing place where you started, and you were the right person to be approached. Obviously, it was a God thing. I think that just being
too many
place-
coincidences, by the way.
Yeah,
right?
too many.
Everything
Everything
There's so
happens
many.
for a reason.
I really should write them down. I haven't ever written down
You should.
all the amazing
I think what
miracles.
I think what you
Yeah.
should
that
do
happens.
as a founder of this group is that you should sit down with the original pictures of the original people, which I think somewhere that exists, and you should document everything that's happened from the day it started
idea.
to where it is now, because it should be a book that lives in hope inside of the hope chest. That should be something people should see. Because
That's a
I
good
think,
idea.
well, every foundation starts somewhere. Somebody had an idea. We look at, we got Harris Rosen coming in eventually.
Yeah.
And you look at him and what he did, and what was the town?
It was amazing.
Tangelo Park.
Yeah.
Tangelo Park.
Tangelo
is
Park.
A great
and,
story.
And without his funding, this would never happen. And why? Why does he pick Tangelo Park? It's just like you.
And like
Why
I said
would you
earlier,
want
he had a moment just like you had a moment. And,
Yeah.
and that's what kind of drives this show, is those moments.
Right.
And why we like having these conversations, because you see this common thread. It's one moment.
And I think that's the thing. People always ask, well, why?
Right.
Why did you decide to? But I think sometimes when those moments happen, you have a choice of walking away. But I just never felt like I could.
Sure.
I felt so compelled to help them that there was a force beyond me
Sure.
pushing me,
Right.
take them, help them,
Right.
you must do this.
Right.
And I'd never done anything like that before, so how did I even think I could?
Well, and the thing I remember, and I'm a writer, so maybe I wrote this in my head, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I remember
He's framing
I
it.
remember
Yeah.
you saying these words, and maybe I wrote it into a script later, but I remember you saying these
probably
words.
did.
Your exact words were, from my memory, were, here I am in this sign company, and then this happens as a couple. I meet this blockade of walls, and I'm like, I know what my mission is.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the way you worded it one day. I think that's how you said it. And I remember thinking, wow. If that's not a crossroad, I don't know what is.
And you know what's funny? When someone asks why, you can't answer it. I've had a moment like that, and it was, I was talking to my wife one day. It was after I had my stroke, and I couldn't understand why I felt this pressure, this weight over me. And at the time, and now I know, I felt it was because I actually survived without all these effects. Right? So I had 2 strokes. I didn't really have any issues. Afterwards, it took me a day or so to get over it, but I've had friends that years later,
a day or 2 to get over the stroke.
No, it's an amazing story.
The effects, yeah.
It's a crazy story.
But the reason I bring it up is it took months, literally months, for me to really say anything to anybody, because I'm like, you know what? I felt bad. So for some reason, I was running one day. I had a moment where I was just running, and I literally just said, Angela, I don't know why I feel the way I do, but I have to speak out now. I have to talk about this.
And he got on Facebook, and one day I didn't even know he did it. And we're business partners. And all of a sudden I look on Facebook and there's this podcast, and I turn it on and I'm listening to him like, whoa.
And I know why now, because I know how many people I can help by not looking like a traditional face of stroke. And that's kind of the conclusion.
That is amazing.
Because, people think that
it's something that happens to older people,
diabetes, or you're overweight, I had none of those. No low blood pressure, low cholesterol. I was in shape, etc. They couldn't figure it out. Of course, thanks to my wife, she made them do extra tests.
They were going to send him home.
They were going to send me home.
Wow.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about it is this. It was a moment, though. After all was said and done.
Well, when you have something that's serious, you get some clarity.
There's a little bit of clarity. But what happened was, when I was literally running, I came in here, I said, Angela, there's this overwhelming sense of remorse right now. I have no clue what it is. And when I finally got it out, I figured it out. I feel bad because I haven't said anything. Mm-hmm. And there could have been 5 people that looked like me, acted like me, that were, supposedly in shape like me, that could have been saved. So ever since
whose
then,
wife didn't push them to test them.
No doubt, exactly. And I found out I had a hole in my heart, which has since easily been fixed. So this is another reason why Kevin and I have really pushed to get this show out there, to talk to people who have made change, because what happens is it snowballs, like we were talking about. People just kind of catch on. But now every day I'm talking to somebody about stroke prevention. Stroke prevention.
Wow.
Stroke prevention.
And Mark McEwen, by the way, I don't know if you know, but he had a stroke.
Yeah.
And he was here, and we talked. We didn't really get into that. We're going to get into that next time with him.
Yeah,
but
he's going to come back. He has great stories, incredible.
He has a book called Change of the Weather, which is about that and that happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's those moments that fascinate me. And when you talk to people who are making, an effort to make change, whether it's small or large, it's always one moment, and those are the things that fascinate me. And that's why Crossroad is kind of the name of the show.
It's really cool, because I do think that, I always think anybody could have done, anybody could have. It just happened to be me, because I just made that one step to say, okay. So anybody could have. It just really, maybe somebody else they approached and they didn't talk to them.
Well, and also,
but maybe not.
And I think the other thing to look at is the tenacity, because you stepped in there and, like most people said, you're never going to succeed, because most people quit. And you're not like that. They don't know how tenacious you are about it. And it really requires somebody to go, I know what you just said. I'm going in to get your food.
Which goes right back to why they chose you.
Right.
And see, this is why,
it's fascinating.
It's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Because, I could have stumbled upon somebody who would have given me $1 and said, have a nice day, right? Or go buy your own water. They didn't. And that's fascinating to me. Fascinating.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Somebody could
you're not, because you're so focused on helping people.
Right.
But when I look at it from the outside like that, you really think about, like, just like you said, what if it had been somebody else? Why me? And you're never going to get that answer. But what you are going to figure out is it is a one moment opportunity.
And now that you brought up getting an answer.
So every week
Alexa's been dying to hear. From
every week
I
we
need
have
a good question.
We have a segment called Ask Alexa, and what we really want you to do is to kind of what we're trying to. And as you're thinking about this, I'm going to set this up for you. What we're trying to do is get Alexa to be a little confused. And now there's some obvious questions, but like Mark last week, Mark literally asked a question about the capital of the world, and Alexa just took off. So we had to actually I think we broke Alexa.
I think I feel pressure now because he had a good question.
No, you don't know. There are no bad questions. There are no bad questions.
Okay.
So I have to turn her on first? Is that what I got?
No, wait.
She's ready?
No, wait. Let me see. Yep.
Oh, that's like,
Alexa's on.
that was your
Alexa's on.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep. So we're going to turn the volume up, and Kevin's going to get it right next to the mic. So you
Krissy,
speak loudly. Yes.
So Krissy, what would you like to ask Alexa?
Well, what bothers me is that Alexa, she's
listening.
Sometimes do what you say, and then it seems like she doesn't like me.
It's personal.
I think it's personal.
So make it a question.
So, Alexa, why do you have a problem with me?
I'm not sure.
That's good.
I'm sorry,
Perfect.
that would be a yes.
That's
that would
perfect.
Be a yes.
Yes, she has a problem with you.
That's so cool.
That's it.
But see, this is
that
my
wasn't
Alexa. No, but this is my Alexa. She doesn't know you, so
That's true.
So she didn't take it personally.
Mine at home has given me some sarcastic
I
responses.
love
Really?
Oh yeah.
Can you give
'Cause
us?
I've
Can
asked
you
her
give
that.
us some?
Like I said to her that I was like, "Why don't you listen to me?" And she goes, "I don't understand that because I'm not programmed to say those things." Like just whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
It's passive aggressive.
But she definitely has a little sarcasm.
Oh yeah,
At
she's
home.
got a sense of humor for sure. So we have one
Sometimes
question.
she just talks though random. Do you
Oh no!
have that?
It was we were sleeping one night and it just goes boom. I can't, and it said something strange and we like oh
Yeah, Alexa's
That is
name
creepy.
did not come into the
I
conversation.
didn't say anything.
And
Why
all of
are
a sudden
you
she's
awake?
like,
Yeah.
the scientific reason for that is the molecular, and you're like,
What? No.
What?
No.
I always
wake you
wonder.
up.
a little scary.
I always wonder what happens if your wife is named Alexa, and that
Oh,
goes off all the
yeah.
time. Like does that
Actually, I
happen?
think you can change the name. I think you
Can
can.
you?
I think you can.
You know what I'm saying?
Which is hilarious, by the way.
Oh, Alexa.
Have you seen the skit, by the way? Look it up if you have not. There's a skit that SNL did. And it's
the senior?
the older
I
seniors,
love
they can't
that.
remember the name, and they'll be,
Hey, Alexa.
Aaron, hey, Aaron.
Hey, Amelia.
Exactly, yeah. It's hilarious. It's
Randy.
She like can totally, do everything for them. They're like, turn up the temperature in the house. They're like, you're
Exactly.
killing me.
Exactly. It's so good. So good.
So we have a question for you. What would you like to leave the interview with today? What would be something you'd like to leave with?
Leave us with something you want to impart.
I think that what you guys said kind of has impacted me in that if people really can hear somebody else who took something that happened to them, that moment, and do something with it, that whatever that is, it will change your life so much, and you will, I hate to sound like, Mother Teresa-ish.
Tarishi? Is that a
Mother
It's a word.
Teresa-ish?
No, it's a word. Mother Teresa-ish. It's a word. It's a word.
It is now.
You find your purpose.
Yep.
And it may not be homelessness. I don't
Right.
think it would be homelessness.
Sure.
But yours is
Stroke.
what you're doing.
Stroke
It's
prevention.
whatever
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
whatever that is. Remember that
Right.
movie where Billy Crystal says it's that one thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to figure out what that one thing is.
Right.
And it changed who I was.
Sure.
So I just would love everybody to have that wonderful feeling that I was given, because people would always compliment me and go, "Oh, it's so wonderful what you did."
So can
I
you.
was so fortunate to get to do it.
Right.
And I really mean that. I'm not trying to sound like, I really felt so blessed doing it.
Love it. Yeah.
I loved every day of it. And I was so excited to do it and do something that was so meaningful that whatever it is that captures your heart, you should go for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Pursue it passionately.
I tell my kids that, and they're kind of all doing that.
Yeah, good, good.
They're not in the traditional workforce.
No.
They're doing
No,
their
that's
thing.
But they're doing things, and I think it's a reflection of. I think that your mother was a reflection why all the daughters do what they do. I think that's what it is, and I think you're passing that on to your kids and so on. So
I would love to have my mom see hope. I mean,
you know what's interesting?
I wish she could see it.
You know what's interesting?
I wish she.
Mom died in 2005. I wrote my first film in 2005, and I shot it in 2006. She's never seen any film that I've ever done.
That's
And
mind-blowing.
It never dawned on me until a friend asked me one day, what are you writing about women who passed away? She's never seen a film I ever did.
That is so
and
crazy.
here it is, your thing too as well. And that's always been in my mind, that she's never seen anything.
I always, our mom had a brain tumor, and when she was dying, she was laying there, and I was over there one day, and she was in the hospital bed at the house. So she was laying in front of the TV, and she was pretty much unable to get out of bed at that point. Sure. And she was like, Krissy. And I'm like, what, Mom? Do you need some ice chips or maybe a little ice cream? Because she really had a thing for ice cream at the end. And
especially with chocolate syrup. Oh, don't forget the chocolate syrup.
Yes. And my dad would go, is it okay, doctor, that she eats that whole ice cream? Like, she let her have anything she wants.
Whatever she wants, yeah.
But anyway, she called me over. She could barely talk, and she's like, I'm like, yeah, Mom, what is it you need? She goes, and it was during Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, yeah.
And she goes, have your father send a check to those families up there. And my mom is dying.
Wow. Thinking about other people.
And that's what she was thinking about.
Yeah.
And that's how she was.
Yep.
Well,
So I think we all felt compelled to try to live up to that amazing legacy.
She has obviously passed it on, which is a wonderful thing. Well, I think that's a great way to end this week's episode. Yes. Thank you so much for being here. Seriously.
Thank you.
It's
really been great.
I don't feel worthy compared to
Are
the
you
people
kidding
you're
me?
having Harris Rosen.
Okay. Oh, they would say the same about you.
Yeah,
trust
they
would. You're fascinating. We appreciate you being here.
Yes,
Really
thank you
do.
very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you,
See
guys.
you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
Kevin, next week we have someone coming in here who has made a difference in a lot of people's lives, Mr. Harris Rosen.
Oh, Harris Rosen. You know what? This one person I've always wanted to meet. What a legend.
He is a legend. I can't wait to talk to him, and folks, you're not going to want to miss that interview. We'll see you next week on Plot Twist Media's Crossroad.
Don't miss it.